Silence has a texture most people never learn to read. It moves through rooms like water, filling spaces between conversations, pooling in corners where secrets gather. Min-jun had learned its language before his 10th birthday, before the fever stole sound and gave him something more valuable in return: the ability to see what others missed. Geumbit Restaurant existed in that space between elegance and illusion. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across white linen. Wine breathed in decanters worth more than monthly wages. Wealthy patrons performed their rehearsed versions of sophistication, believing the price of admission purchased safety, along with 7-course tasting menus. They were wrong. Min-jun sat at table 9, his usual position. Back to the wall, clear sightline to both entrances, close enough to the kitchen to observe the mechanical ballet of service. His charcoal suit had been tailored in Milan by a man who understood that true power whispered. At 32, he had built an empire on the principle that people revealed everything when they thought no one was listening. His security sat 2 tables away, disguised as friends enjoying expensive food. They were good at their jobs, which meant they were nearly invisible. Ji-eun moved through the dining room with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to exist in the margins. 6 months at Geumbit had taught her wine pairings and the architecture of wealth. 24 years of life had taught her something more useful: how to notice what others dismissed. She brought Min-jun his water. Sparkling, no ice, lemon on the side. He nodded, the gesture minimal but genuine. His eyes tracked movement across the room with calm assessment. She wondered what he saw. The evening progressed with mechanical precision. 1st course delivered, 2nd course plated. But something felt wrong in the rhythm. Insu, the head chef, was sweating despite the kitchen's climate control. Taemin kept glancing toward the bar where an unfamiliar man nursed the same drink for 40 minutes. Ji-eun paused near the expo line, pretending to check her order pad. 2 voices drifted from the narrow space between storage units, speaking Mandarin in urgent whispers. Tonight, table 9, the sauce. He won't taste it. Her blood went cold. Table 9. The deaf man who noticed everything except the conspiracy unfolding 3 meters away. She reached for a blank receipt and made a decision that would rewrite both their futures. Ji-eun's pen hovered over the thermal paper, ink bleeding slightly into the fibrous surface. Her Mandarin was imperfect, cobbled together from 2 semesters of university classes before money ran out and survival replaced ambition. But she had heard enough. Tonight, table 9, the sauce. Words that assembled themselves into murder dressed as fine dining. She could walk away, finish her shift, collect tips, go home to the small apartment in Mapo-gu where her mother's voice crackled through phone calls asking about rent money and her brother's college entrance exams. She could preserve the careful invisibility that had kept her safe in a world that dismissed young women in service uniforms as interchangeable and harmless. Instead, her hand moved. Korean characters forming uneven strokes across the receipt. 당신의 음식에 독이 있습니다. 조심하세요. Your food has been poisoned. Be careful. The words looked inadequate, too small for the weight they carried, but there was no time for poetry, no space for doubt. She folded the paper once, her fingers trembling slightly, and moved toward table 9 with the practiced composure of someone delivering nothing more consequential than a bill. Min-jun was reading something on his phone, his expression composed in that way powerful men cultivated, present, but unreachable. She placed the receipt beside his wineglass, the paper stark white against dark burgundy liquid. For a heartbeat, nothing changed. The dining room continued its performance. Conversations flowed. Silverware clinked against porcelain. Then he glanced down. His eyes moved across the Korean characters with the speed of someone fluent in reading urgency. No shock registered on his face. No alarm. Just a subtle shift in posture, the way a blade turns in darkness. He looked up at her, his gaze steady and calculating. She felt the weight of that attention like pressure against her sternum. He lifted one finger, tapped twice on the stem of his wineglass. The sound was delicate, almost musical, but it carried through the room like a command transmitted on frequencies only certain people could hear. His security rose simultaneously, movements synchronized and unhurried. One moved toward the main entrance, another toward the service corridor. A third positioned himself near the kitchen doors. Ji-eun heard the lock engage on the front entrance, a soft metallic click that most diners missed beneath the piano music drifting from hidden speakers. But she heard it. And so did the maitre d', whose hand froze on the brass lever when he tried the door moments later. "Sir," he whispered, approaching table 9. "The door appears to be—" Min-jun raised his hand. Silence fell with the precision of a dropped curtain. Conversations broke mid-sentence. Laughter died in throats. Dozens of wealthy patrons suspended in sudden awareness that something had shifted in the architecture of their evening. The restaurant, moments ago a cathedral of performance and privilege, transformed into something else. A sealed chamber. Beauty still intact. Chandeliers still glowing. Wine still breathing. But danger now seated at every table. Min-jun folded the receipt with deliberate care, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and stood. The movement drew every eye. He smoothed the front of his suit with elegant finality, then turned his gaze toward the kitchen. His expression held no rage, no fear, only the calm certainty of someone who had already calculated costs and accepted them. Ji-eun took one step back, then stopped. Something in her refused to retreat into invisibility. She had written the warning. She had crossed the threshold between witness and participant. Min-jun's eyes found hers again. He gestured once, a small motion that somehow conveyed both gratitude and consequence. Then he walked toward the kitchen doors, and Ji-eun, operating on instinct she didn't fully understand, followed him into the space where conspiracies were prepared and served. The kitchen doors swung open on a wash of heat and the metallic tang of cooking equipment. Steam rose from multiple stations, blurring the edges of white-coated figures who moved with the rehearsed efficiency of people executing choreography they had perfected over thousands of services. Min-jun entered with the unhurried pace of someone walking to his own car, not toward potential execution. The kitchen noise began to stutter and fail as cooks registered his presence. Spatulas hovered, timers beeped into silence. The mechanical rhythm of professional cooking collapsed into uncertain stillness. In-soo stood at the pass, a ladle in one hand, inspection towel draped over his shoulder. His chef's toque made him look taller than he was, more authoritative. For 5 years he had commanded this kitchen like a small, efficient kingdom. Now his composure cracked at the edges, sweat beading along his temples despite the climate control. "Mr. Min," In-soo said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "you're not supposed to be back here. Health codes?" Min-jun's gaze swept across the line. 6 cooks, 2 dishwashers, the pastry station, the sauté station, the grill. Each pair of hands suddenly very aware of themselves. He rested his fingertips on the edge of the pass, the gesture casual but somehow transforming the steel surface into a boundary. He withdrew the receipt from his pocket and placed it on the stainless steel between them. In-soo's eyes flicked down, then away, too quickly to be innocent. Min-jun's hands moved in precise gestures, Korean Sign Language delivered with the clarity of someone who had long ago accepted that silence was his native tongue. Ji-eun watched the signs, not understanding their meaning but recognizing their weight. In-soo's face drained of color. He shook his head, voice rising. "That's insane. If someone wanted to harm you, they'd do it in the street, not with beurre blanc." Min-jun gestured again. One of his security men stepped forward, holding a small silver sauceboat captured in a gloved hand. He tilted it under the overhead lights. Tiny crystals caught the illumination, nearly invisible unless you knew to look for them. They slid in a delicate line along the rim, not dissolving the way salt should. "Salt," Insu said, but his voice had lost conviction. The security man opened a field testing kit on the counter with the calm efficiency of someone checking oil in a car. He dipped a test strip into the sauce, waited 3 seconds, then held it up. The pale paper bloomed into a dark, unmistakable color. A collective intake of breath moved through the kitchen. Somewhere, a timer continued its insistent beeping. No one silenced it. Min-jun signed again, his movements slow and deliberate. Insu watched the gestures like a man watching his own sentence being written. "I don't—" Insu started, but the lie died before completion. Ji-eun stood near the dish pit, back against the wall. Jun, another server, had followed her in and now clutched a water pitcher so tightly his knuckles had gone white. His eyes moved between the locked doors and Min-jun's face, searching for escape routes that no longer existed. Min-jun's hands moved again, and this time, Ji-eun understood the question even without knowing the signs. "How long?" Insu's shoulders sagged. The ladle slipped from his grip, clattering against stainless steel. Tonight was supposed to be the first time. Another lie. Ji-eun could feel its shape in the way the line cook near the grill refused to meet anyone's gaze, in the way Taemin had positioned himself near the service entrance as if calculating distance to freedom. Min-jun tilted his head slightly, a gesture that conveyed disappointment more effectively than words ever could. He had built his organization on trust calibrated through observation. Betrayal wasn't shocking. It was simply data that required response. He signed again, and one of his men moved to the far end of the kitchen where a narrow door led to the alley. The security man placed his palm flat against the metal, locking it. Another posted himself by the walk-in cooler. The kitchen, like the dining room, transformed from open workspace to sealed chamber. Insu's breathing had gone shallow. "You don't understand. I didn't have a choice." Min-jun's expression didn't change, but something in his stillness sharpened. He gestured once more, a question delivered with surgical precision. "They threatened my son," Insu whispered. The words came out broken, each syllable carrying the weight of fear that had lived in his chest for weeks. "They said if I refused, they'd take him from school, that I'd never see him again." The revelation hung in the kitchen air, heavy as the steam rising from forgotten pots. Min-jun absorbed this information with the patience of someone who had heard worse. His hands moved again, slower now. Insu nodded. "Men from the Northern Syndicate. They said you'd gotten soft, that you were vulnerable, that Seoul needed different leadership." Min-jun signed a single word. Ji-eun didn't understand Korean Sign Language, but she recognized the shape of a name being formed. Insu's face confirmed it. Taemin helped coordinate, the chef admitted. He was supposed to ensure the timing, make sure the sauce reached your table at the right temperature, the right moment. Across the kitchen, Taemin made his calculation. He bolted for the service entrance, shoes sliding, slightly on the tile. He made it 3 steps before Min-jun's security intercepted him with economical efficiency. No violence, no drama, just immovable presence blocking escape. Min-jun walked to where Taemin now stood, breathing hard, suit jacket askew. He studied the sommelier with the same calm assessment he might give a wine that had turned. His hands moved in signs that required no translation. Taemin's face went pale, then flushed with desperate anger. "They offered me a percentage," Taemin said, voice sharp with defiance. "A real stake, not tips and shifts. Actual ownership." Min-jun's expression remained neutral, but Ji-eun saw something flicker in his eyes. Not rage, something colder, the recognition that greed, unlike coercion, offered no redemption. He turned back to Insu, who stood at the pass with the posture of a man awaiting sentencing. Min-jun signed again, and Insu translated without being asked. his voice hollow. He says he's disappointed, not surprised, just disappointed. The kitchen had gone completely silent now. Even the ventilation fans seemed to hold their breath. Min-jun withdrew his phone, typed something, and showed the screen to In-soo. The chef read it, his expression shifting from fear to confusion to something resembling fragile hope. "You're letting me go?" In-soo asked. Min-jun shook his head. He typed again. In-soo read the new message and understanding dawned. "You want me to call them, tell them it worked?" Min-jun nodded once. The gesture carried the weight of a command that was also an opportunity. A chance for In-soo to choose redemption over complicity, however temporary that redemption might be. Ji-eun watched this negotiation unfold in gestures and silence, and understood something fundamental. Min-jun hadn't come to the kitchen for revenge. He had come to reposition pieces on a board his enemies thought they controlled. The office at the back of the kitchen wasn't designed for elegance. A battered desk held stacks of invoices and order forms. A dented refrigerator hummed in the corner, holding staff meals and emergency supplies. The walls were bare except for health inspection certificates and a calendar marking deliveries and inventory checks. But Ji-eun noticed what mattered most. No cameras. A deliberate blind spot where conversations could happen without becoming evidence. In-soo entered first, moving with the careful steps of someone walking on ice. Min-jun followed, gesturing for Ji-eun to come as well. She hesitated at the threshold, every instinct screaming that she had already crossed too many boundaries tonight. But Min-jun's expression held something that might have been expectation. He had included her in this moment by choice, not accident. She stepped inside. The door closed behind them with a soft click that felt louder than it should. In-soo picked up his cell phone from the desk, a simple device stained with kitchen oils and long shifts. His hands trembled as he held it, staring at the screen like it contained instructions for his own execution. Min-jun typed on his phone and held it up. In-soo read the message and nodded once, his throat working around words he couldn't quite form. "I call the number they gave me," In-soo said, translating for Ji-eun's benefit. "I tell them it's done, that you're deteriorating. They'll want a location for extraction." Min-jun typed again. In-soo's jaw tightened as he read. "The service alley, 20 minutes." He looked up at Min-jun. "They'll send 3 men minimum. Maybe more following. You can't—" Min-jun raised one hand, cutting off the protest. His expression remained calm, almost gentle. He typed another message, this one longer. In-soo's eyes widened as he read. "You're not going to kill me," he whispered, disbelief coloring his voice. Min-jun shook his head. He gestured toward the phone, then toward In-soo, then made a sign that Ji-eun didn't understand but somehow felt the weight of. Protection. Safety. Distance. "My son," In-soo said, the words breaking. "They know where he goes to school. They know his routine." Min-jun typed rapidly, his fingers moving with the efficiency of someone who had learned to communicate entire philosophies through abbreviated text. He turned the screen toward In-soo. The chef read in silence, his expression cycling through emotions too complex to name. Relief, shame, disbelief. Something that might have been gratitude wrestling with the knowledge that gratitude was inadequate currency for the debt he owed. "You'll move him," In-soo said slowly, reading Min-jun's plan. "New identity. New school. Protection until this is finished." Min-jun nodded. "And me?" Min-jun typed again. In-soo's face went pale as he absorbed the terms. "I disappear. Tonight. Passport, cash, transport arranged. I leave Seoul and don't come back." Another nod. "I don't deserve this," In-soo whispered. Min-jun's response was immediate. He typed 4 words and held them up with the finality of a closing argument. "You were coerced. They weren't." The distinction mattered. In-soo had chosen betrayal under duress, protecting someone he loved. The men who had weaponized that love had chosen cruelty as strategy. Min-jun's code, however brutal, recognized the difference. In-soo dialed from memory. The phone rang twice before connecting. A voice answered, smooth and assured. Male, carrying the confidence of someone who believed their plan had already succeeded. Status, the voice said. In-soo swallowed, his vocal cords adjusting to produce the lie. It's done. Toxin administered. He's deteriorating rapidly. Ji-yoon's stomach clenched at how easily the deception flowed. Professional, measured, exactly what someone reporting successful murder would sound like. Good, the voice replied. Location? Service alley behind the restaurant. 20 minutes, minimal surveillance. Clean crew or extraction? Extraction. He's worth more breathing than dead. A pause. Ji-eun could hear the calculation happening on the other end of the line. Min-jun's eyes sharpened, reading information from silence that she couldn't detect. You've done well, the voice said, warming slightly. You'll be compensated. Your son will remain safe. The cruelty of that assurance landed like a blade. They controlled both the threat and the salvation, ensuring loyalty through terror dressed as generosity. In-soo closed his eyes. Thank you. He ended the call and placed the phone on the desk with the careful precision of someone handling evidence. His hands were shaking badly now, adrenaline and fear colliding in his nervous system. They'll have 3 men waiting, he said, possibly more in reserve. They'll expect you to be weak, disoriented, easy to transport. Min-jun nodded, absorbing tactical information without visible concern. He typed again. In-soo read and looked up sharply. You want me to come with you? Min-jun's expression was unreadable, but his message was clear. In-soo knew their voices, their patterns, who commanded whom. That knowledge was strategic asset. If they see me, they'll know you lied, In-soo said. They'll kill both of us. Min-jun typed a response that made In-soo laugh once, a breathless sound caught between hysteria and resignation. You'll use me as bait if necessary, In-soo translated. And if I die, at least my son lives. That's more than I'd have otherwise. It wasn't comfort. It was mathematics. But In-soo seemed to find something almost honorable in the brutal honesty. Min-jun turned to Ji-eun. His hands moved in signs she still couldn't read, but his phone filled in the gaps. He typed and showed her the screen. You're coming too. Her breath caught. I don't know how to fight. Min-jun's fingers moved across his phone screen. You already did. You chose to warn me when silence was safer. That's the hardest fight. She stared at the words, understanding settling into her bones like a second pulse. She had written the warning. She had followed him into the kitchen. She had stood witness to confession and consequence. There was no walking back to her old life, to invisibility and tips and double shifts. She had crossed the threshold, and Min-jun was telling her the crossing was permanent. What do I do? She asked. Min-jun typed, Stay behind me, watch everything, survive. The instructions were minimal, almost insulting in their simplicity. But his eyes held something else. Recognition, perhaps. Or calculation. He was assembling pieces for a board game she didn't yet understand. In-soo grabbed a chef's coat from a hook, shrugging into it like armor. The white fabric made him look official, professional, absurd for what came next. But it restored dignity to a man walking toward his own reckoning. Min-jun checked something concealed beneath his jacket. Ji-eun caught a glimpse of metal, compact and efficient. A weapon built to hide beneath refinement. He chambered around with a muted click that sounded intimate in the small office. Stay at my back, he signed, and In-soo translated unnecessarily. Ji-eun had understood the gesture. They moved toward the door. The kitchen beyond had resumed some semblance of function, cooks moving mechanically through orders that would never be served to tables that would never reopen tonight. Min-jun paused at the threshold, one hand on the door frame. He looked back at Ji-eun, his expression carrying something she couldn't quite name. Warning, maybe. Or acknowledgement that they were both about to step into territory where survival wasn't guaranteed, only earned through precision and cold mathematics. She nodded once, accepting terms she didn't fully comprehend. They stepped into the night. The service alley behind Geumbit smelled of rain that hadn't yet fallen, diesel exhaust, and the sweet rot of food waste waiting for morning collection. Narrow walls of stone and brick caught every sound and amplified it: the distant hum of traffic, the drip of condensation from air conditioning units, the careful breathing of three people moving toward danger. Min-jun stepped out first, his movements unhurried. No hesitation, no performance of courage. Just the calm of someone who had calculated outcomes and accepted their probability. In-soo followed, chef's coat stark white against the darkness, making him visible in ways that felt deliberately sacrificial. Ji-eun came last, her server's uniform blending into shadow, heart hammering against her ribs with rhythm she couldn't control. The alley stretched 30 meters before opening onto a side street. Dumpsters lined one wall, their bulk creating pockets of deeper darkness. Security lights mounted above the restaurant's back entrance cast pools of amber illumination that didn't quite reach the far end, where a car waited. Black sedan, engine running silent, lights off. Professional setup. Three silhouettes leaned against it with the relaxed posture of predators who didn't need to posture. Their existence was threat enough. Min-jun stopped 3 steps into the alley. He didn't crouch, didn't take cover, didn't reach for the weapon Ji-eun knew he carried. He simply stood, hands loose at his sides, and waited for them to make the first move. One figure detached from the car and walked forward. His stride was casual, unhurried. As he entered the light, Ji-eun saw a man in his 40s wearing an expensive suit that suggested management rather than labor. His face was pleasant, almost kind. He looked like someone who would hold doors open while calculating the dollar value of lives. "Mr. Min," the man called out, his voice carrying false concern. "Rough night? You look pale." Min-jun didn't respond. His silence was tactical, forcing them to fill empty space with assumptions. "Chef In-soo called with worrying news," the man continued, stepping closer. "Something you ate disagreed with you. Food poisoning is so unpredictable, isn't it?" His smile widened, elegant and lethal. Ji-eun watched Min-jun track the man's approach with the stillness of someone reading information from posture and breathing patterns. "We've arranged transportation," the man said. "Private medical facility, very discreet. You'll receive excellent care while we discuss some business matters that require your attention." 2 more figures moved from the car, not threatening yet, just repositioning, creating a loose triangle that would make escape geometrically difficult. Min-jun's hands moved in a single sign. Even without understanding Korean Sign Language, Ji-eun recognized it as a question. The man's expression flickered with irritation at being forced to interpret. "I'm sorry, I don't—" In-soo's voice came from behind Min-jun, hollow and scared. "He asks who sent you." The man's smile returned. "Does it matter? You're in no condition to negotiate." Min-jun signed again, more slowly, deliberately. "He says," In-soo translated, his voice shaking, "that you made one mistake tonight." The man tilted his head with practiced patience. "Oh? And what's that?" Min-jun's hands moved with the precision of someone delivering a closing statement. In-soo's translation came quieter now, almost reverent. "You assumed poison would make him slow." The words hung in the alley for one perfect heartbeat. Then Min-jun moved. His hand cleared his jacket in a blur that Ji-eun's eyes couldn't quite track. No theatrics, no warning shot, no dramatic declaration, just surgical efficiency. 2 shots, spaced less than a second apart. The sound cracked through the narrow space, echoing off stone walls. The two men flanking their leader dropped. Not dead, disabled. One clutched his leg, the other his shoulder. Precise placement that destroyed mobility without causing arterial damage. Professional violence calibrated to send a message rather than end lives. The leader froze, his pleasant expression collapsing into shocked calculation. His hand moved toward his jacket, then stopped. Min-jun's weapon remained trained on center mass, steady as architecture. Jesus, the man whispered, the false courtesy evaporating. You can't be. Min-jun lowered the weapon slightly, not holstering it, just adjusting trajectory from lethal to conversational. His free hand signed something quick and sharp. Insu's voice came from the shadows, barely audible. He says to tell your employer that Seoul is not available for purchase. The leader's jaw worked around responses he couldn't quite form. His two associates groaned on the ground, conscious but incapacitated. The mathematics of the situation had inverted in seconds. Who owns it then? The man asked, some of his composure returning. You? Min-jun smiled. The expression was brief, controlled, terrifying in its restraint. He signed again. Insu translated, ask them who wrote the message that ruined their evening. The leader's gaze shifted past Min-jun, past Insu, landing on Ji-eun. She felt the weight of that attention like physical pressure. Recognition dawned in his expression. Confusion, then ridicule, then something that might have been respect, fighting against disbelief. This woman. This server in borrowed uniform and cheap shoes. This nobody had detected their plan and dismantled it with handwritten Korean on thermal paper. The leader looked back at Min-jun, and Ji-eun saw the exact moment he understood he was facing someone who operated on different principles than he'd anticipated. Not louder, not more violent, just more precise. Min-jun holstered his weapon with the same economical motion he'd used to draw it. His hands moved in signs that required no translation. Go. Insu whispered the interpretation anyway. Tell them we're awake now. The leader didn't argue. Predators recognized larger predators, and survival meant knowing when to retreat. He moved toward his wounded associates, helping them toward the car with efficiency born of training. No bravado, no threats, no promises of retribution. Just acceptance that the board had shifted. The sedan's engine engaged with a soft purr. Headlights flared, momentarily blinding. Then the car reversed down the alley and disappeared into Seoul's midnight traffic. Silence reclaimed the space. Not safety, just aftermath. Insu sagged against the brick wall, breath coming in ragged gasps. His legs gave out, sliding him down until he sat on cold concrete. God, he whispered. God, you actually... Min-jun turned toward Ji-eun. She stood exactly where she'd been when violence erupted, feet rooted to pavement, hands clenched so tightly her nails had left crescents in her palms. Her nervous system was catching up to what her eyes had witnessed, adrenaline flooding her bloodstream with messages her body didn't know how to process. Her knees buckled. She didn't fall. Min-jun caught her elbow with surprising gentleness. His grip was steady, anchoring her to ground that suddenly felt unreliable. He guided her to sit beside Insu, both of them trembling for different reasons. Min-jun stood above them, breathing deep and measured. Not triumph, not fear. Calculation. Reading the next moves on a board his enemies thought they controlled. Ji-eun found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. What happens now? Min-jun's hands moved in signs that carried the weight of inevitability. Insu translated without being asked. Now we decide whether to disappear or take everything they thought they owned. The choice hung in the air between them. Run or fight, hide or conquer, safety or war. Insu looked horrified, his chef's coat stained with sweat and fear. But Ji-eun looked at Min-jun, at the man who had stood between her and death with casual precision, who had rewritten assassination into opportunity with 2 shots and silence, and heard herself ask a question that would define everything that followed. What does taking it entail? Min-jun's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but close. Something that recognized her question as the first move in a game she was only beginning to understand. He typed on his phone and showed her the screen. War, but with better manners. Rain began to fall, light at first, then harder. The alley filled with the sound of water on stone, washing blood toward gutters, erasing evidence that anything had changed, but everything had. They returned to the restaurant through the service entrance, 3 bodies moving through corridors of stainless steel and residual shock. Rain followed them inside, tracking across tile in patterns that looked like accusations. The kitchen had emptied at some point. Min-jun's security must have sent the staff home while violence unfolded in the alley. Now only silence remained, broken by the hum of refrigeration units and the distant drip of water from inadequately dried dishes. Min-jun walked to the dining room. Tables still held abandoned meals, wine glasses frozen at various levels of consumption. Napkins lay crumpled beside plates where panic had interrupted elegance. The restaurant looked like a moment captured in amber, wealth interrupted by consequence. He sat at a table near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Gangnam's glittering night. Rain streaked the glass, distorting neon into abstract calligraphy. His posture suggested someone settling in for conversation, not someone who had disabled 2 assassins minutes earlier. Ji-eun stood at the opposite end of the table, arms wrapped around herself. Her uniform was damp from rain, clinging to shoulders that hadn't stopped trembling. Her mind kept replaying the alley, the crack of gunshots, bodies falling, her own paralysis between the instinct to flee and some stubborn demand to stand witness. Insu poured himself whiskey at the bar with hands that shook badly enough to make the bottleneck chime against crystal 3 times before he managed a successful pour. He drank it in one swallow, gasped, and poured another. "I almost got you killed," he said to no one in particular. "I almost got myself killed. I almost—" Min-jun raised one hand. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. His other hand moved to his phone, typing with the efficient precision that characterized all his actions. He turned the screen toward Insu. The chef read, his expression cycling through disbelief. "You're arranging my escape tonight?" Min-jun nodded once. "Why?" Insu's voice cracked. "I betrayed you." Min-jun typed again, longer this time. Insu read in silence, his eyes reddening. "You say it's not about me. It's about them using my son as leverage." He laughed, a sound caught between gratitude and self-loathing. "That changes the rules." Min-jun's expression confirmed what his words had stated. There were lines even in Seoul's underworld. Violence was currency, loyalty was transactional, betrayal was expected. But weaponizing children crossed into territory that voided all previous contracts. Ji-eun stepped closer, drawn by curiosity stronger than exhaustion. "What rules?" Min-jun's gaze shifted to her, measuring. He typed and showed her the screen. "Power has structure. Money flows up, violence flows down, information flows everywhere. But children are neutral ground. Using them as pressure means the person giving orders doesn't understand the architecture they're trying to control." She absorbed this, understanding settling into place. Min-jun wasn't operating on rage or revenge. He was responding to a strategic error that revealed his enemy's fundamental misunderstanding of the system they hoped to inherit. "They think you've gone soft," Insu said quietly. "That's what they told me, that you've become civilized, manageable." "Have you?" Ji-eun asked before she could stop herself. Min-jun's mouth curved slightly. He typed, "I've learned restraint. Not the same thing." The distinction mattered. Restraint implied choice, calculation, the ability to deploy violence with precision rather than volume. Civilization implied weakness. His enemies had mistaken one for the other. Insu set his glass down with careful deliberation. What happens to my son? Min-jun typed rapidly. New identity, new school, protection until this ends. You'll write him a letter. He'll receive it when he's old enough to understand. I can't just abandon him. Min-jun's response was immediate. You're not. You're ensuring he survives long enough to have a father. The logic was brutal but sound. If Insu stayed in Seoul, his son remained leverage. If he disappeared, the value of that leverage dropped to zero. The syndicate would have no reason to harm a child who no longer bought them compliance. This isn't mercy, Insu whispered. Min-jun shook his head. Typed. It's options. Choose badly and they kill you both. Choose well and maybe he remembers you as someone who protected him. Insu buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent crying, the sound absorbed by the empty restaurant. After a long moment, he nodded without looking up. Min-jun turned his attention to Ji-eun. His expression shifted, became more focused, assessing damage that wasn't visible. You need to leave too, he typed and showed her. Her heart stuttered. What? You were seen. You interfered. You're a liability now. Indignation flashed through her exhaustion. Then why involve me? Why not let me walk away before they noticed? Min-jun's response came quickly. They noticed you the moment you wrote that warning. You chose a side before you realized there were sides. The truth of it hit harder than the fear. She had crossed a threshold the instant her pen touched thermal paper. Everything after was consequence. Do you regret it? He asked via text. No, she answered too quickly, surprising herself. Something flickered in his expression. Not quite approval, but recognition. He typed. That answer will cost you. She stepped forward, pulse steadying for the first time since the alley. What do you need from me? The question reorganized the room's geometry. Not what do you want me to do, but what role do I occupy in your survival now? Min-jun's response was immediate. I need you alive. She blinked. That's it? Just alive? For tonight? Yes. And after tonight? His fingers moved across the screen with deliberate slowness, choosing words that would carry weight. After tonight, I need you competent. The word landed like a verdict. Ji-eun frowned. Competent for what? Power. Insu looked up, startled despite his grief. You're building succession. Min-jun shook his head. Typed. Partnership. Infrastructure. The syndicate thinks in terms of hierarchy. One person at the top, everyone else scrambling beneath. That's their weakness. And your strength? Ji-eun asked. Distribution. Multiple centers of gravity. Harder to kill, easier to adapt. She stared at the words, understanding dawning. He wasn't trying to become a bigger target. He was trying to become multiple targets, dispersed across a network that couldn't be eliminated through singular assassination. You're talking like we're a corporation, she said. Min-jun's response was simple. We are. Just one with sharper margins. Thunder rolled through the night outside, deep and resonant. Rain hammered against windows with increasing urgency. Insu poured another whiskey but didn't drink it, just held the glass like an anchor. They'll try again, he said quietly. Min-jun nodded, typed. I know. They'll come harder. I know. And you'll kill them? Min-jun looked out the window at Seoul's glittering darkness. His response, when it came, surprised both of them. No. Ji-eun leaned forward. No? He turned back toward them, calculation returning to his expression. I won't kill them. I'll make them obsolete. The distinction was subtle, but profound. Killing created martyrs, vacuums, opportunities for others to claim righteous vengeance. Making them obsolete meant restructuring the entire ecosystem so their power became irrelevant. Not removed, rendered meaningless. How? Insu asked. Min-jun typed for almost a minute, constructing his strategy in efficient prose. They think Seoul's underworld is a kingdom with a throne. One person sits, everyone else serves or plots. But kingdoms are inefficient. They require constant defense of a single point. What if there's no throne? What if power distributes across networks that can't be captured or controlled through traditional violence? Ji-eun absorbed this, her exhaustion giving way to something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or recognition that she was witnessing strategy that operated on frequencies most people never detected. "You're not fighting them," she said slowly. "You're changing the rules they fight by." Min-jun's almost smile returned. Exactly. Insu drained his whiskey in one motion. They'll never accept it. They don't have to accept it, Min-jun typed. They just have to become irrelevant while it happens around them. Lightning flashed, illuminating the dining room as a stark white relief. For a moment, every abandoned table became visible, evidence of lives interrupted, illusions shattered. The cost of believing wealth could purchase immunity from consequence. "What do I do?" Ji-eun asked, her voice steadier now. Min-jun met her eyes. His response came in 4 words. "Don't run. Learn. Survive." Why me? The question escaped before she could evaluate its wisdom. Why trust someone you just met? His answer was immediate. Because you're the only person in this room who acted without incentive. She frowned. I don't understand. He typed. Insu acted under threat. Taemin acted for profit. My security acts for salary. You acted because you saw danger and decided someone should intervene. People who act without incentive can't be controlled, only respected or destroyed. The weight of that assessment settled into her chest. He wasn't offering safety. He was offering a choice between 2 dangerous futures. Which will you choose? She whispered. His expression sharpened into something that might have been promise. We'll find out together. The lights flickered. Rain surged against windows with renewed intensity. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, not because of them, but because the world always burned somewhere. Min-jun stood, signaling the end of one phase and the beginning of another. He typed a final message and showed it to both of them. At dawn, we go to the people who tried to kill me. We negotiate the future of Seoul. Insu stared, his face pale. With violence? With clarity, Min-jun corrected via text. And if they refuse? Ji-eun asked. Min-jun didn't smile, but something in his posture conveyed absolute certainty. His final message needed no elaboration. Then Seoul will remember tonight as the last moment before the rules changed. Dawn arrived not with drama, but with the gradual dissolution of night. Gray light filtered through rain-streaked windows, turning Seoul's skyline from neon constellation to concrete geometry. The storm had passed, leaving only the aftermath. Wet streets reflecting weak sun, the city exhaling steam like something recently wounded. Ji-eun stood at the window, watching delivery trucks begin their morning routes. Ordinary life resuming its rhythm while she existed in a space between her old world and one she hadn't yet entered. She had showered in the staff facilities, changed into clothes borrowed from the restaurant's emergency supply, a simple black shirt and pants that fit poorly but felt cleaner than the uniform that still smelled of fear and rain. Behind her, Min-jun sat at the same table where he'd nearly been poisoned hours earlier. The irony wasn't lost on her. He was drinking tea now, prepared by his own hands, trusting nothing that passed through others' preparation. His suit jacket hung on the chair back, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows in the only concession to informality she'd seen him make. Insu had left an hour ago, escorted by 2 of Min-jun's security to a safe house where new documents and transport waited. His last words had been whispered to Ji-eun as he passed. You still have a choice. Run while you can. But she hadn't run. She had stayed, made tea, watched dawn arrive, and waited for Min-jun to explain what came next. He gestured for her to sit. She took the chair across from him, the same distance that had separated them when she first delivered the warning. A lifetime ago, measured in hours. His phone lay between them, ready to translate silence into strategy. You stayed, he typed. I did. Why? Ji-eun considered the question, searching for truth beneath the easier lies. Because going back to my old life would mean pretending tonight didn't happen. And I don't think I can pretend anymore. Min-jun's expression shifted slightly. Approval, perhaps. Or recognition of something familiar. He typed. Most people choose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. I'm not most people, she said, surprising herself with the certainty. No, he typed. You're not. He poured her tea from the pot he'd prepared, the gesture unexpectedly domestic. She wrapped her hands around the cup, letting warmth seep into fingers that had been cold for hours. What happens at dawn? She asked. Min-jun's fingers moved across his screen with deliberate precision. We meet with the board, the men who funded tonight's attempt. We sit across from them in a conference room that costs more per hour than your monthly rent, and we negotiate. For what? For everything. The scope of that ambition should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something else. Curiosity sharpened by exhaustion, the strange clarity that comes from having nothing left to lose. What makes you think they'll negotiate instead of killing us? Min-jun's response was immediate. Because I'm bringing proof that their preferred contractors failed spectacularly. Because I'm demonstrating that their intelligence network has holes large enough for a server to drive a warning through. Because I'm offering them something more valuable than my death. Which is? A way to save face while accepting new terms. Ji-eun absorbed this, understanding the elegance of his strategy. He wasn't demanding surrender. He was offering a restructuring that let them pretend they'd chosen it. And if they refuse? Min-jun set his phone down, looked at her directly. His hands moved in signs she was beginning to recognize. Not the words, but the weight behind them. Then he typed. Then we demonstrate that Seoul's underworld has already changed and they're the last ones to notice. She sipped her tea, buying time to process. You keep saying we. Yes. Why include me? I'm nobody. I have no training, no connections, no skills that matter in your world. His response was longer this time, each word chosen with the care of someone drafting contract terms. You have something more valuable. You see patterns before they become problems. You act on moral clarity when others hesitate. You can't be bought because you don't know your price yet. And most importantly, you're unexpected. Unexpected how? They'll spend months analyzing tonight, trying to understand how I detected their poison, how I knew to counterattack. They'll investigate my security, audit my staff, search for the leak in their operational security. They won't think to analyze the server who simply decided to intervene. Ji-eun felt the weight of being repositioned from bystander to strategic asset. You're going to use me. Yes, he typed without hesitation, but you'll use me too. That's what partnership means. I don't know how to do any of this. You do. His response came quickly. You just don't realize it yet. You've spent years reading people, their needs, their moods, their unspoken demands. You've learned to anticipate, to notice, to position yourself advantageously while maintaining invisibility. Those are the same skills I use, just in different contexts. She wanted to argue, to insist he was wrong, but memory surfaced. The hundreds of times she'd diffused angry customers through careful observation, the way she'd learned to predict kitchen chaos before it erupted. her instinct for reading power dynamics in dining rooms where wealth performed its rehearsed superiority. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Min-jun typed, "Today. Sit beside me, watch, learn. Say nothing unless I ask you to speak. Your presence is the message. I have resources they didn't account for. And after today? After today, we find out what you're capable of becoming." The vagueness should have frustrated her. Instead, it felt like possibility. Her entire life had been defined by limitation: financial, social, educational. Boundaries she'd accepted as permanent. Min-jun was suggesting those boundaries were arbitrary, enforceable only through her own compliance. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Good," he typed. "Fear means you understand the stakes. Stupidity would be worse than terror." She laughed, a short sound that surprised them both. "Is that supposed to be comforting?" His almost smile returned. "I don't traffic in comfort, I traffic in clarity." Rain began again, lighter this time. Not the dramatic downpour that had accompanied violence, but steady precipitation that would last hours, the kind that made Seoul's traffic crawl and turned streets into mirrors. Min-jun checked his phone, reading something that made his expression tighten. "The car arrives in 20 minutes. Where are we going?" "Gangnam Finance Tower. 40th floor. Conference room that officially doesn't exist on building schematics." "And they'll be waiting?" "They're always waiting. That's what boards do. Wait in expensive rooms while others take actual risks." Jiyoon finished her tea, set the cup down with steady hands. Her fear hadn't disappeared, but it had reorganized itself into something more useful: vigilance rather than paralysis. "Can I ask you something?" she said. Min-jun nodded. "Why do you do this? Build power? Manage threats? Operate in spaces between legal and not? You could walk away. Disappear with enough money to live comfortably anywhere." His response took longer this time, as if he was excavating truth he rarely articulated. "Because silence taught me something. The world doesn't see deaf people as powerful. They see us as diminished, limited, requiring accommodation. I built this empire to prove that observation is more powerful than volume. That stillness can be more threatening than noise. That power doesn't require speaking. It requires being impossible to ignore." The honesty landed with unexpected weight. She realized she was witnessing something rare: vulnerability from someone who had weaponized its absence. "Thank you," she said. "For?" "For telling me the truth." Min-jun's expression softened by a fraction. He typed, "You wrote truth on a receipt when comfortable lies would have been safer. I owe you equivalent honesty." Outside, a black car pulled to the curb. Engine running, windows tinted, embodying the aesthetics of power that preferred not to be observed. Min-jun stood, rolled down his sleeves, shrugged into his jacket with the precise movements of someone preparing for performance. He looked exactly as he had the night before: immaculate, controlled, dangerous in ways that didn't announce themselves. Jiyoon stood as well, checking her borrowed clothes, wishing for armor she didn't possess. Min-jun noticed. He typed, "You don't need different clothes. You need different posture. Stand like you chose to be here, not like you stumbled into it." She adjusted her shoulders, lifted her chin. The shift was subtle, but transformative. "Better," he typed. "Now remember, you're not the server anymore. You're the person who saved my life. That carries weight." They walked toward the exit. The restaurant that had been a battlefield now looked abandoned, tragic. Tables waiting to be cleared, wine stains on white linen, the ghost of elegance interrupted. At the door, Jiyoon paused. "What if I fail?" Min-jun's response was immediate, final. "Then we both do. That's what partnership means." She nodded, accepting the terms. They stepped into morning light, rain misting their faces. The city stretched before them, millions of people moving through ordinary days, unaware that somewhere on the 40th floor, rules were about to be rewritten by a deaf man and a server who had chosen courage over invisibility. The car door opened. They entered. And Seoul, having exhaled violence into its alleys, waited to see what shape power would take when silence finally spoke.